My adoption took 10 years to adopt a child with Down syndrome. We hear all the time from people, who's going to adopt all these unwanted children? But I noticed when I started looking, there was a list of more than 300 families waiting just to adopt a child who had Down syndrome. And it took me, as I said, 10 years in my journey. What's your best advice for parents who are beginning that journey?
Well, you certainly have to recognize what you just said, even though you want to adopt, it may take some time. And as you mentioned, even for a Down syndrome child or children with other health issues, somebody wants to adopt that child somewhere. And often it's multiple people that want to adopt. So the problem with facing Americans in adoption today is not so much are there people willing to adopt, it's the number of parents that are willing to place their children for adoption, born and unborn.
And those numbers have dropped dramatically. Years ago, a lot of people put their parents, or their children up for adoption. Today, parents just aren't making that decision. What are the statistics on that?
The last time I looked at the Center for Disease Control statistics, it was 0.07 of unmarried white women who are pregnant that would place their child for adoption. And that was in 1973.
And you know those numbers are even lower for parents of special needs children or those parents who've had that positive triple test. Part of the problem, and I can speak to this personally, is that I was under the mistaken notion that organizations like Planned Parenthood were in the business of, if the mother didn't want to abort that child, of saying, hey, there are options out there. But they don't do that. That's, yeah, I made you laugh. Yeah. It's not funny, but that's a misnomer out there. I really thought that. And for 10 years, I called Planned Parenthood and other abortion agencies and said, hey, if you have this mom come in and she doesn't want her baby, will you let her know that I do want her baby? And being a public person, I'm like, she could Google me and figure out I'm not some creepy person who's gonna, who's gonna be a bad mom. I'm gonna do my best with this child. We already have children. We're a good, solid family. Please tell them about us. Never one time in 10 years, Dewey, did I receive a phone call from any abortion agencies that I called. So one thing that people need to realize if they're looking into adoption is that abortion advocates, abortion agencies are not in the business of adoption at all, period, ever.
They don't make their money if that birth mom places her child for adoption. And it wasn't just you. I mean, there are agencies that have been in the same town where there's a Planned Parenthood that does abortions, and they will never get a referral.
Yeah.
Or if it's maybe once a decade, they'll get a referral. It's an incredibly low number.
So that story about, what's going to happen to all these children that are unwanted, you're saying, I know exactly what's going to happen to them. They're going to get adopted into really good families. But the problem is a shortage of children, not a shortage of people willing to adopt children, even those with special needs.
Sure. For your typical situation, say, what you think will be a healthy white infant, although the white part is getting lower and lower. But I could, for every adoption I do, I could probably place that child 50 times over with people who want to adopt. And even with special needs children, where you would think, this is going to be a tough sell or a tough placement. We would have, 5 to 10 families that would love to take that child.
So I think people think that because there are a lot of children in foster care, that means that there are a lot of children, babies, that go unadopted. And that's really not true today, is it? And I'm not just talking about white children. We want to be careful about that because I'm talking about, I didn't specify skin color on my child. I just wanted a child with Down syndrome. I didn't care what color he was, and it turns out he is a minority. So most people today, they're not even making those sort of, they may not feel equipped to take a special needs child, and I understand that. I wouldn't put that on someone. But more than you think, if there's a waiting list of 300 families to adopt a child like I wanted, and my only qualification was that he had Down syndrome, I didn't care about anything else, then there's a waiting list for every kind of a child, isn't there?
Race, for example, race really doesn't matter like it used to, say, 20 or 30 years ago. Every child that is born where the parents want to place that child for adoption, that child can easily be adopted. Now, not maybe from the adoptive parent standpoint, like where you had to wait 10 years, but when that child's born, there's a line of people that would love to have that child in their home.
the problem is getting the message to those people who are in that situation, because it's not something that is commonly known. I just had a letter yesterday from my agent, who ultimately I had to pay someone to go find this child for me because I couldn't get through to the abortion facilities, and she did that. And I emailed her and said, I'm interested in helping with this, and she said, yeah, I just had a situation like that last week, and unfortunately the baby died, and she wasn't positive whether the child was a very, very, very late term abortion or whether it died at birth. But this tends to be what happens to these children, because these parents don't understand that that if they were to put that child up for adoption, it would likely land in a loving forever family.
Yeah, yeah.
What's the best advice you have for people who are just beginning this journey, looking to adopt a child?
I would say the first thing to do would be to call an agency, or maybe call a lawyer.
Which was the last thing I did.
Yeah.
Because I thought I could go around that.
Right.
Yeah.
It's difficult. I mean, there are a few people that do it on their own, but it's difficult. They often spend more money trying to.
Certifiably, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Certifiably.
an agency like ours, people call and I'll tell them, here's how adoption is working now. Where, in your state or in my state, this is what you need to do. Here's what you need to expect. Here's how you need to prepare yourself. Here's how much it will cost. So I think that would be the first step I would advise somebody to do.
And the other thing that's changed dramatically in recent years, really, is the international adoptions have gone way down. Countries have locked their doors. They're keeping their orphans, and they are putting them in horrific situations. I've been there. I've been in Russia, in the orphanages. I know very well what's going on. And while this is devastating, that means there's even a greater demand for babies that just isn't being filled.
Right.
What's your message to that person, that parent, that mother, or even father in some cases, who has found themselves with an unplanned pregnancy?
That's a difficult choice for that parent. And when I see parents who place their child for adoption, I'm thinking, these are my heroes. These people are making a decision. I almost can't express what I feel, because they're being the best parent they can be at that moment by letting somebody else be the parent.
Yeah,
And
so true.
adoption today is not the same as it was 30 or 40 years ago in terms of ongoing contact. Often today, the birth parents get information about their child that they placed for adoption. Sometimes I'm there when they meet 4 or 5 years later.
Well, I have to tell you that we had a closed adoption, and our birth mom had relinquished her rights to my child Samuel when we adopted him. But I put him to bed every night, and I would think to myself, I have to thank her. And I searched her out and found her. And today we are the best of friends. In fact, we're taking a vacation together here in just a couple of weeks. And she's very close to him and very close to me. And it's a lot less threatening than I thought. And there's something about holding that child that is the single biggest gift you've ever received from anyone, and not ever having the opportunity to thank that hero, as you said. People really can be a hero in this, can't they?
Oh yeah, and they are. I think the statistics are clear that the children are going to be, much better off. And I always tell people, if you're serious about placing, or I tell my adoptive families, if they're serious about placing a child for adoption, probably that child should be placed for adoption. But still, you have to imagine, it's just a gut-wrenching thing to do.
It is, but you know what? It's not as gut-wrenching as abortion. I've done post-abortive counseling, and I've done post-adoptive counseling, and I can tell you that the impact on that parent, on that mother, and even in many cases on that father, is much more gut-wrenching if the pregnancy is aborted, much more so than if that child is ultimately adopted. And those statistically, that's scientific fact.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the post-adoption or post-abortion syndrome.
It's very real.
Yeah, I think sometimes they think abortion is a short-term solution.
Easy answer.
Yeah, easy.
It isn't.
But it isn't. It's going to have lifetime consequences, and
adoption has lifetime consequences that are so amazing and heroic. And while it can be difficult, I just really hope that more people will consider it, and they certainly can contact you if they want to. Thank you so much for being on the show, Dewey. Tell us where we can find you online.
A giftofhopeadoptions.com.